I hope everyone enjoyed that music to get you excited this morning. But good morning and welcome. My name is Meredith Archie. I'm the president of NC Chamber Foundation and a proud native North Carolinian and a proud mother of 2 girls. So today's topic is one of great importance to me. Thank you for joining us this morning for our Child Care Survey Findings webinar. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. All attendees are muted to avoid any distractions during today's presentation. Second, please submit any questions through the chat box. We'll be addressing these at the end of the session today. And also, the recording of today's webinar will be shared in a recap email within 24 hours of the webinar. As the NC Chamber's Long-Term Planning and Research Center, the NC Chamber Foundation addresses the most critical and difficult challenges and opportunities ahead of North Carolina. Our data-driven agenda ensures North Carolina continues to stay ahead of critical issues and achieves measurable improvements across all areas of competitiveness. One of the most essential factors for North Carolina's economic success is attracting and retaining talent. A key component of that is access to quality, affordable childcare for our workforce. While anecdotal evidence shows that childcare is a nonpartisan issue that is top of mind for North Carolinians from all walks of life, we wanted to measure the data and better understand the perspectives of North Carolinians. We commissioned a statewide survey of North Carolinian voters to understand their childcare experiences, the impact it is having on their ability to work, and their understanding and support for childcare. With that, I'd like to introduce Laurie Weigel, principal of Newbridge Strategy, the research firm that conducted a statewide survey for us. Laurie will walk us through the results and will answer questions if time allows. Thank you, Laurie.
Great. Well, thank you. This is already the best webinar Zoom I've ever been a part of because it started with ABBA. So let me get to the heart of the matter here and talk a little bit about what we found in this survey. So first of all, my firm, Newbridge Strategy, we're a woman-owned opinion research firm that conducts research throughout the country, mostly on matters related to public policy, and a great deal of that is related to education, childcare, and these other types of issues. So we were looking at a statewide sample of 500 voters. And just to give you some perspective, when we're doing national work, we're usually talking to 800 to 1,000 respondents in order to represent all Americans. So 500 is a very typical statewide sample. That was conducted April 13th through 18th, and there's a number of things listed here that we do to ensure the data is representative, to ensure that we're providing access to conduct the interviews via either online or via cell phone or landlines. So we're not excluding anyone and giving people an equal opportunity to participate. Of course, with any survey, there is a margin of error. In this case, it's just under 4.5%, but for some of the subgroups I'll talk about, it's a little bit higher than that, predictably. So we looked at a number of different issues and just wanted to start by giving people a range of different potential things they might be concerned about and ask them to tell us how serious a problem this is in North Carolina. And these were not volunteered. We gave them each one of these, and for each one, they responded and told us how they would classify this. Is this an extremely serious problem, very serious problem, somewhat serious, not really, or not a problem here in North Carolina? So what you're seeing here in the pink bars are those who said that it was at all serious, so extremely, very, or somewhat serious combined. Within each bar, those white numbers are telling you the proportions that said it was extremely or very serious. So I don't think anyone's shocked that the top two are sort of the things that are at the top of our news feeds or on the front of the page of the paper often, things like the cost of housing or crime. But not very far behind that is lack of quality, affordable childcare programs. So 77%, over 3/4, are telling us that's a serious problem in North Carolina. Almost half, 48%, said that was an extremely or very serious problem. It's eclipsing some mainstays like jobs or infrastructure issues like the congestion of roads or lack of high-speed internet access. So things that are often really closely connected to the economy. Lack of quality, affordable childcare programs is really a tick above those in terms of people seeing that as a serious problem facing the state right now. And notably, this is throughout every type of community. So whether someone is in an urban area, suburban, small town, or rural area, and they define those themselves, what type of community they live in, we're seeing that significant proportions are telling us it's an extremely or very serious problem. So it's really not something that's just relegated to certain types of communities in the state. And it's really something that's recognized across party lines as being a problem. So the intensity is certainly higher among Democrats in the state, with 69% saying it's extremely or very serious problem. But within, even at the other end of the spectrum with conservative Republicans, we have 2/3 overall saying it's a serious problem, and more than 1 in 3 saying it's an extremely or very serious problem. So we gave people all those various issues, right? When they were all jumbled up, they were randomized so there wouldn't be any sort of order bias. And then we said, okay, now let's think just about some other aspects related to childcare for children from birth to age 5. And how much of a problem do you think each one of these is in your area? And again, these were jumbled up, so there's no sort of order bias. But what we're seeing is really everybody is saying, wow, these are problems here. Whether it's low wages for childcare teachers and workers, whether it's the cost of childcare that families have to pay, or whether more broadly it's this idea of the challenge of parents regularly face balancing childcare and work responsibilities. You can see that we've got a majority telling us these are extremely or very serious problems, each one of these, and we're hitting like stratospheric numbers. There's not too many things I ask about where almost everyone is telling us that that's at least a somewhat serious problem. All 3 of these are in that sort of stratospheric level in terms of people saying that these are serious problems in the state. And that's true across party lines as well. So you can see for whether it's low wages, whether it's costs that families have to pay, or just this general concern about, this balancing childcare and work responsibilities, everyone is really recognizing these as problems. And that's true among parents and those who don't have kids at home. You just don't get these kinds of huge numbers without seeing that really bleed into all segments of the electorate. So we also asked a question asking people whether they, sort of to reflect back and ask them about since 2020 and the start of the pandemic, did they think that the availability of quality and affordable childcare has gotten better, gotten worse, stayed about the same, or did they just simply don't know? So we're giving them that opt out essentially in terms of being unsure how things have gone. But we've got a significant plurality, near majority of 45% telling us that they feel like things have gotten worse. I've done focus groups, the small group discussions in person around the country, talking about childcare and related issues. And we've definitely seen that it's just much more visible than it used to be. And I've talked about these issues for over 15 years. We just didn't used to see the kinds of numbers that I'm presenting to y'all today. So really a significant proportion saying it's gotten worse, just recognizing more problems than what they've experienced in the past. And this is really, again, like I mentioned, this is not just among parents. It's not just among parents of children in that youngest age group, even though it's higher among them, where 2/3 feel like things have gotten worse. But 2 in 5 folks that don't have children at home, whether they're grandparents or not, really are telling us that they think things have gotten worse. So whether that's they're seeing their experiences of their coworkers, or they're hearing about it anecdotally from friends and family and neighbors, folks are really recognizing this is a problem that's gotten worse. And more specifically, when we talked to people and we went through a battery of different aspects of some of the challenges that people are facing, asked them for each one, hey, is that something that applies to you, applies to someone you know, or really doesn't apply, period, to either to you or someone you know. When we walk through these, y'all, these numbers are just, they are just huge. So we are seeing that, for example, on the first one, people are telling us that they've relied on family, friends, or neighbors to help provide childcare, not for a short-term gap, but because it is too expensive. So that phrase is really important here. We've got 1 in 4 North Carolinians telling us that applies to me personally, and a majority saying, well, it doesn't apply to me, but it applies to someone I know. So very, very few just being left out of this dynamic. Also, it's affecting their work experience. So 1 in 5 saying they've called out or missed a shift at work because of a problem with childcare, and many more saying that applies to someone they know. They've had to cut back on other household essentials because of struggling to pay for childcare. Again, it ticked down from what we just saw, but 15% saying that applies to them personally. And if you extrapolate that out to the thousands of North Carolinians, that's a lot of people that are telling us they're cutting back on other essentials due to the cost of childcare. Other things are going to impact them for years to come. We have 13% saying they've not pursued job training or continued education due to a lack of affordable childcare. Another 2 in 5 are saying that applies to someone they know. 12% say they've had to leave the workforce because of an inability to find affordable childcare, and nearly equal number, 13%, say they've turned down a job opportunity, promotion, or change because it would increase childcare expenses. So that's really just leaving a lot of people sort of stunted in terms of their career or job development, simply because of this one single issue of childcare. If you look at the parents of young children, or just even parents overall, we've got astounding numbers. So 3 in 5 saying they've missed work or relied on others, sort of their social network, in order to provide childcare because it's too expensive. We've got basically a third or more for these middle 3 categories, whether it's turning down a job opportunity, not pursuing job training or continuing ed, or had to cut back on other essentials. And 1 in 4 parents of children ages birth to 5 that have had to leave the workforce, they're telling us, because of an inability to find affordable childcare. So that is a lot of workers out there that are simply saying, I've got to opt out for now. So given that, we see that people are having these personal experiences, but more importantly, they are connecting this in many ways to the economy. This is something we've seen nationally. We've seen in a number of different states that voters are telling us that this is something that's not just a nice to have, it's a need to have. When we ask them how important is access to quality, affordable childcare to our ability to strengthen the economy and help workers be able to provide for their families, we've got 4 in 5 saying it's either essential or very important. So really connecting the dots in a very strong way. Another 18% saying it's somewhat important. There's almost no one just dismissing this as unimportant to our state's economy. And again, that is true in every type of community in the state. So it's not as if rural residents are dismissive of this in any way. We've got basically 3/4 or more telling us they think it's essential or very important to strengthen the economy and help workers be able to provide for their families. And again, most things I talk about or listen to people talk about are often fall along party lines, and this is not one of them. So we've got across the partisan spectrum in the state, we've got the vast majority telling us that they connect access to quality, affordable childcare with our ability to strengthen the economy. So I think that's why we see people really telling us this is not just important, but an urgent problem. We asked them to tell us whether taking action to ensure more working families have access to affordable quality childcare should be an important priority for North Carolina this year versus maybe not this year, right? So we've got 87% saying, yeah, y'all need to get on this. So versus only 12% saying, no, maybe we could kick the can down the road. People are really seeing this as an urgent problem. And I think even more significant is not just the urgency of it, but that people are willing to back it with state funding. We asked them whether they supported or would oppose increasing state funding to provide more working families with access to affordable, high quality childcare. We have 4 in 5 saying, yes, we need to increase state funding for that. 45% strongly in support, only 1 in 5 saying that they're opposed to that. And usually with state funding, you know, people can get a little bit wishy-washy, but so these are really significant numbers. We've got basically 2/3 of Republicans saying we ought to be increasing state funding for this, 4 in 5 independents, and 9 in 10 Democrats. And even with conservative Republicans, well, it's really margin of error distinction here, but it's also, you know, right at that 2/3 mark with that smaller slice of the electorate. And it's not just parents that are backing this. Even among those who do not have children under the age of 18 living in their home that they're responsible for right now, we've got 3/4 of those folks telling us that they're supportive of increasing state funding. It's really, again, overwhelming among parents. And look at those grandparents, probably because they're getting called in for some of these duties. And again, it's in every type of community as well. We then asked them whether improving the quality of childcare and making it more affordable for families is a good investment or bad investment of taxpayer money. So, you know, is this really something that we need to back it up with those taxpayer dollars? And we've got a majority, 54%, telling it's a very good investment, a total of 86% saying it's very or somewhat good investment, and very, very few finding this to be a bad investment of dollars. And again, very little partisanship here. There's some relationship to party, predictably, whenever we're talking about taxpayer money, there always is. But the fact that we've got 3/4 of Republicans saying it's a good investment of taxpayer funds, that doesn't happen on every type of issue. And really, voters are seeing this as a bipartisan issue that they want state leaders to work on together to improve access to these programs. We've got 9 and 10, again, virtually the same numbers that said, hey, let's do this now, that are saying this ought to be bipartisan and y'all ought to be able to work together on this. We framed out a few other statements asking people whether they agreed or not. The numbers are so low for the disagree. We're just showing you the intensity of agreement, and then the total agree is at the end of those bars there in the slightly dimmer magenta colors there. So the lack of childcare in North Carolina being a problem that's not going to solve itself, and saying that North Carolina should invest in solutions, much like what we saw before. There is strong agreement with this, 81% telling us they agree with that. Why is that? Probably because a lot of people think it's hurting North Carolina families, but 82% saying they believe the lack of enough quality childcare is hurting families. And that the lack is also making it harder for North Carolina businesses to hire employees and grow. 73% agree with that. So the intensity and overall agreement's a little higher that it's hurting families, but the vast majority are still saying connecting it to the economy and to how it's impacting North Carolina businesses overall. And that's, again, I know I sound like a broken record, but this is true across partisan lines. While there is some relationship there, these numbers, it's overwhelming majorities, so Republicans, independents, and Democrats that agree with all 3 of those statements. I also think it's important not to lose the fact that people are telling us there are benefits from this, and in a very different way than we used to hear a decade ago. We now hear people be able to articulate these types of benefits, not just for children, although that's definitely in here. You can see that people tell us that children developing important social skills or having academic success in school, that a majority think that's going to have help a lot for those kids. And in fact, the vast majority say it's going to help a lot, a fair amount, or some. but also, again, tying it to the economy and to workers. The top one here, the greatest intensity we saw was ensuring workers are able to go to work reliably without worrying about childcare concerns or breaking the cycle of poverty, even a much bigger idea. 58% feel that would help a lot, and more than 9 in 10 think it's going to help at least some. And, you know, similarly, just a tick below that are things like enabling more parents to be able to start or continue their careers, or enabling more workers to pursue job training or continuing education. Again, we just have people ascribing many, many benefits to kids being able to attend quality childcare programs. So I really think that there's sort of a very different level of awareness than what we used to see pre-pandemic, that people are recognizing the benefits of quality childcare, and they are connecting it to the economy in a way that, again, that we didn't used to see. And that's definitely the case here in North Carolina, where we're just hearing voters just pretty adamant that they want to back this up with resources, that they don't think it's a problem that's going to fix itself, and they want leaders to take action quickly to handle this. So I'm going to stop sharing just so I can see y'all better, and then I think we have time for questions. And there's a lot of people here. Yay.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lori, for leading us through the results of the survey. Our team's been monitoring the chat, some great comments in there, but no questions yet. So we'll continue to kind of take a look at that. Does anyone have any questions? If you want to put them in that chat box for Lori or Meredith, we'd be happy. We have some time to answer those today.
Good morning. Hi there. My name's Jenna Nelson. I'm with the Early Education Coalition. This is such great information. Do you all, meaning the chamber, plan to share this with legislators? And if so, how and when?
Thanks for that question, Jenna. Appreciate that. Our NC Chamber team is actually on this with the rest of you, seeing these results for the first time as well. So I'm sure they are figuring out what exactly they'll be doing with those and what the timeline will be. But we're appreciative of the foundation for commissioning the research.
Yeah, and I'll just add, from a foundation standpoint, this is public information, so we want it to be shared as far and as wide as everyone would like to. So I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Should we assume that Lori was just so thorough there aren't any additional? Okay,
oh, hey, this is
I'm
Travis
sorry.
at WRAL. I'm sorry, I thought I was supposed to put the questions in the chat. Can I run through several?
You can. There is one in the chat, but if you want to throw them in there, that would be great.
All right, they're in the chat, but I'll also throw them out here. I would like to see the crosstabs. Someone said they were going to go out in the next day or so. I would encourage you to send them out immediately. Okay. How many of the 500 children, 500 people surveyed have children?
Yeah, so the proportion was, sorry, I'm having tech difficulties today. So let me pull up in a separate screen. My screen's decided not to work today, which
well, while she's looking at that, Caitlin or Meredith, you know, the abortion bill had a bunch of money in it for childcare. Do y'all want the governor to sign that? And then also, are you satisfied with what's in that bill for childcare plus the House budget? How close does that get to what y'all think ought to be done here at the chamber?
Hey, Travis, this is an NC Chamber Foundation webinar, so I can definitely connect with our NC Chamber team and follow up with you afterward on that.
All right, Meredith, you want to speak for the chamber? Excuse me, for the foundation on that?
So we're just doing the research and putting it out today, Travis. We're not advocating for any legislation at this point. So we can follow up on the chamber side of the thing on your legislative question specifically.
Okay.
It was 20, sorry, we were talking to voters, so they tend to skew older than adults across the state, just keep in mind. So it was 29% that had a child under the age of 18 that they were responsible for in their homes. So they could have been a guardian, could have been a grandparent that's responsible for that child as well.
And then do you have the percentage for children 0 to 5?
It was 12%.
12%. And that's the 29% is inclusive of the 12%, yes? All right,
Yes.
thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And then at the beginning, Lori, if you don't mind kind of running through really quickly how the survey was distributed, that'll
Yeah.
be in the slides and recap.
Yeah, sorry, I was just responding to that in the chat, but so the survey was conducted. We used a mixed mode methodology. So we used both an online tool to allow people to participate for those of us who may screen our calls a lot. And then we also combined that with text and phone calls to cell phones, and then also landlines. So to make sure that we're getting a healthy mix of types of communities, and no one, just because they're beyond cell phone reach, could not participate. And that's a very typical statewide methodology these days, just for context. So I would say someone's asking how North Carolina data compares to other states we've surveyed. I mean, I really think in this I don't know if we're supposed to call it post-pandemic period or what we're supposed to call it these days, but following the major crises that we dealt with there for a while, we really have seen I think it's very similar. We're seeing just a very increased awareness, and we've typically seen around 45 to maybe just a bare majority of folks feeling like the availability of quality childcare has gotten worse. We've long seen that people sort of recognize the cost of childcare as a problem, but that everything about childcare is sort of ramped up in levels of intensity and levels of awareness. And I think the other thing, and maybe it's just all of us being on these Zoom calls and watching people that had small children at home for a while struggling with, working and balancing all that out. There's just a really different connection to the economy and to the workplace than what we saw prior to the pandemic. So I really do think these numbers are fairly in line with what we've seen nationally and what we've seen in a few other states where we've asked some of the same questions, not all certainly, but some of the same questions. So I think North Carolinians are very much like Americans broadly. They are recognizing this as a problem. They are recognizing that it affects workers in the workplace. And I will say one thing that's really jumped up a lot is concern about the low wages for childcare workers. That was not something that was well recognized, say 7-8 years ago. And now that is very much on people's consciousness.
And then we have a question to Lori about how we parsed out conservative GOP from Republican. Was that a self-identification for you all? Okay.
So we asked, yeah, so we look at partisanship overall, and then we ask people to describe their ideology when it comes to politics. Do they think of themselves as a conservative, a moderate, or a liberal? And so then we combine those two questions. So you do have still some moderate Republicans. So we segment out conservative Republicans, although granted, most Republicans will describe themselves as conservative too. So we wanted to look at sort of the further end of the spectrum within that, just to see, because some of the data was so overwhelming among Republicans overall. I wanted to make sure that we were really looking at every aspect of this, especially when it comes to taxpayer funding. The fact that we've got such significant numbers among even conservative Republicans is really striking.
Yes, it was 500 voters. That was a question. Do we survey 500 voters? That was the sample size.
And that's proportional throughout the state. So we know in which county everybody is, so that we're making sure that it's representative and proportional throughout the state. And I don't go away, so if y'all have a burning question in the middle of the night, we can always follow up with you. So
yeah, and it looks like Brittany, you're kind of asking that question. Current parent of child under 5. I hear you also, that position. And so we are planning to share the research that we covered today. The NC Chamber Foundation will be putting that out, as Meredith said, to share it far and wide, as everyone on this call would like to share it. And then Meredith, I don't know if you want to speak to next steps from the foundation side on this issue.
Sure, Brittany, and this doesn't exactly answer your question, but now that we've kind of done this phase one and understand where North Carolinians are on this issue, how they are relating to it, and what their experience is with it, our plans are to evaluate a next step, kind of phase two from a research standpoint, and look at benchmarking with other states, policy innovations, and what some potential recommendations could be there. So that's what we're looking at on the horizon for the NC Chamber Foundation.
Thanks, Meredith. Any other questions for Lori or for Meredith?
One other question I have, Lori, is as you look at this data, I mean, it seems like within every slide, there could have been additional research done to kind of dig in and figure out like really what's going on, like especially some of the slides about the people who knew people who were in situations where they, had to rely on someone else to provide childcare, or they couldn't accept a promotion. Like, are there specific things, just as a researcher, that you see that you would say, gosh, if we had the ability to do like a follow-up where you would go deeper and what you'd want to learn?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of interesting because some of those questions came out of the fact that we have sat and talked to voters around the country about childcare in the last year. And some of the specific wording and phrases actually came from them, from listening to people and them talking about what they're seeing, experiencing. And maybe it's not personally affecting them. I had a man in Tennessee say, my wife is the manager at a restaurant, and like the main reason that somebody doesn't show up for their shift is because they've had, a childcare crisis or a problem. And so, so some of that we have mimicked back to see, okay, well, we heard that story. Let's see how many people that's affecting, or how many people know someone that have been affected in that way. I do think the connection to the economy and those types of stories is something that's really striking and interesting in terms of the dynamics here. That is sort of a new aspect that people are really connecting to this in a different way. So I guess if I was going to dig in on one thing, it'd be how they're perceiving this in terms of the economic impacts, and hear a little bit more about that. And then certainly we have in the past talked to childcare workers themselves. And so that's always revealing and enlightening in completely different ways. So, in some of those challenges and barriers to improvement.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Lori. And Allie, you have a hand up.
Hi, yes, good morning. Thank you. Maybe a question for the foundation about next steps. I'm sure that our legislators in the state obviously are hearing about this topic probably daily and would love data. Is there a way that we can host a webinar and invite our legislators or maybe some of their staff? And also, I think another group that would be really beneficial to hear this information firsthand would be like our economic development directors in the counties and at the state level and so forth that we work with as they're working on this topic as well.
Absolutely. And I think you're along a train of thought that a lot of people on this call probably are. And we do appreciate the legislators and legislative staff that did sign on to this webinar. I know there are a few of them on here today. So thank you for making the time, and we appreciate the opportunity to share the research. Great question.
I'll just
Meredith?
add, no, I was just going to add that this was open to everyone, and certainly the recording of this will be sent out afterwards. It'll also be on our website, so it can be shared with any legislators who are not able to make today, so that they can get the findings and hear the conversation as well.
Thanks, Meredith.
And I'll just add to Lori, we're here. This is information that will live on, and we can continue the conversation with anyone who wants to have that.
Yes, and to Meredith's point, when you go to ncchamber.com, there is a foundation link there. And if you click that, there's a drop down and the resources will be added as we have them available. So I think that wraps up our questions. I'll send it back to you, Meredith, to close this out. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And thank you all for attending today's Child Care Survey Findings webinar. We hope you found today's content valuable. As we just learned, North Carolinians are experiencing a child care crisis that is hurting families and making it hard for businesses to hire employees and grow. With federal child care stabilization funding ending this year, the crisis is likely to worsen. The bottom line is that affordable, quality child care supports working parents on the job, allows businesses to recruit and retain talent, and helps our children develop skills for success in school and life. Our hope with these results is that we can come together as business and community leaders, policymakers, and North Carolinians to find solutions to this challenge. I do want to mention, and it was mentioned within the Q&A today, is that the NC Chamber launched its Coalition on Child Care, led by Deborah Durr, with the goal of advancing appropriate child care funding sources and structures, policy reforms, and innovations aimed to addressing the growing workforce demands on the North Carolina business community. You can learn more about their efforts on the Chamber website as well. Again, you'll receive a follow-up email tomorrow where you can have access to today's recording of the webinar and other resources to learn more and share information about these important findings. Thank you for joining and have a great day.